Hello and welcome to the BA Knowledge Share. In this episode, I go through key terms of Chapter 2 of the BABOK Guide. So without further ado, let's get started. Key terms. There's a couple of key terms that are important in the BABOK Guide. Number one is business analysis. We went through that kind of the definition in Chapter 1, but this is a more formal definition. Business analysis is the practice of enabling change in an enterprise by defining needs and recommending solutions that deliver value to stakeholders. So notice the items in bold here, and these tie back to the business analysis core concept model. So there's words that you want to remember: change, needs, solutions, value, stakeholders. The only thing missing here is context, which is part of the BACM, which is not over here. Business analysis information refers to the broad and diverse sets of information that business analysts analyze, transform, and report. Examples of business analysis information include elicitation results, requirements, designs, solution options, solution scope, and change strategy. So we went through business analysis. We went through business analysis information. Now let's see what's next. Design. A design is a usable representation of a solution. Design focuses on understanding how value might be realized by a solution if it is built. The nature of the representation may be a document or a set of documents and can vary widely depending on the circumstances. So design is a usable representation of a solution. So it depends upon the context of the work you're doing. Say, for instance, if you have requirements and you're working on a website, your requirements are business requirements, your functional requirements, and your design could be something like a prototype of the website. So it depends upon what you're working on and the perspective. Enterprise. An enterprise is a system of one or more organizations and the solutions they use to pursue a shared set of common goals. These solutions, also referred to as organizational capabilities, can be processes, tools, or information. For the purposes of business analysis, enterprise boundaries can be defined relative to the change and need not be constrained by the boundaries of a legal entity, organization, or organizational unit. An enterprise may include any number of business, government, or any other type of organization. So let's go through that again. An enterprise is a system of one or more organizations and the solutions they use to pursue a shared set of common goals. So it could be a company that has a bunch of departments underneath it, or it could be a separate units altogether, but they have a common goal. All right, and then for the purposes of business analysis, enterprise boundaries can be defined relative to the change and need not to be constrained by the boundaries of legal entity, organization, or organizational unit. So enterprise could be a combination of the vendor or the company itself, but they all have a common goal of maybe setting up a billing system in an organization. That's just an example. The last definition in the BABOK in that section, and actually that's not true. So there are a couple more. So that you have the organization as the definition that's provided. An organization is an autonomous group of people under the management of a single individual or board that works towards common goals and objectives. Organizations often have a clearly defined boundary and operate on a continuous basis, as opposed to an initiative or project team, which may be disbanded once its objectives are achieved. So an organization is an autonomous group of people under the management of a single individual or board. It could be a company in this case, that were a pharmaceutical company. It could be any sort of healthcare company, hospital that works towards common goals and objectives. Organizations often have a clearly defined boundary. Now, in the enterprise, there isn't a limit to the boundary as long as you're working towards a common goal. But over here, an organization does have a clearly defined boundary and operate on a continuous basis as opposed to just an initiative. So it's ongoing. It's has a life of its own. But a project is limited and lifespan ends after the project ends, right? So think of it that way. Next key term is plan. A plan is a proposal for doing or achieving something. Plans describe a set of events, the dependencies among the events, the expected sequence, the schedule, the results or outcomes, the materials and resources needed, and the stakeholders involved. Right? So a plan is a proposal for doing or achieving something. Let's look at the definition of requirement. A requirement is a usable representation of a need. Requirements focus on understanding what kind of value could be delivered if a requirement is fulfilled. The nature of the representation may be a document or set of documents, but can vary widely depending on circumstances. So it is a usable representation of a need. So that's a requirement. And then lastly, a risk. Risk is the effect of uncertainty on the value of a change or solution or the enterprise. Business analysts collaborate with other stakeholders to identify, assess, and prioritize risks, and to deal with those risks by altering the likelihood of the conditions or events that lead to the uncertainty, mitigating the consequences, removing the source of the risk, avoiding the risk altogether by deciding not to start or continue with an activity that leads to the risk, sharing the risk with other parties, or accepting or even increasing the risk to deal with an opportunity. So risk is the effect of uncertainty. Now, every project, everything in life has a risk associated with it. But in terms of business analysis, it's the effect of uncertainty on the value of change, a solution, or the enterprise. Now, you as a BA would collaborate with other stakeholders to identify, assess, and prioritize risks, and to deal with those risks by altering the likelihood of the conditions or events that lead to the uncertainty. As an example, you would mitigate the consequences, removing the source of the risk, avoiding the risks altogether by deciding not to start or continue with an activity that leads to the risk, or share the risk with the other parties, or accept or even increase the risk. So there's a couple of options that you could do with the risk, as long as it is understood by all parties involved in the project, all stakeholders involved in the project. As an example, there could be a solution on a project, or let's talk about requirement. There could be a requirement on a project that where it's known there's a risk associated with it. Now, the stakeholder could say, oh, yeah, we accept that risk when we understand that if we implement this, X, Y, Z can happen. So in that case, your stakeholders are accepting the risk. Another option could be, how do you mitigate the risk? The mitigation of the risk could be you come up with another option. Well, we implement a hybrid solution, and that would mitigate part of the risk. So you kind of have to have those conversations with your stakeholders as you move along. Some instances, you may find that that requirement, don't identify the risk, and you can't identify the risk to that requirement ahead. And then it kind of goes to solution, and when it's implemented, you find out, oh, there's a risk associated with it. In that case, you still go through the motions of, do we mitigate the risk? Do we remove the risk? Do we avoid the risk? And so on and so forth. So thank you so much for listening to the Be Knowledge Share episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And that being said, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, as well as visiting our website, beknowledgeshare.com. Until next time, thank you.